Welcome into another edition of Inside Carolina's Day After. That's Buck Sanders, that's Jason Staples, I'm Tommy Ashley, and we are title sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Guys, we talked a little bit off air wondering about what to talk about with this show, and I think I'm going to go this way. I think I'm going to give each of you overall thoughts on what you saw Saturday against Campbell, and then we're going to sort of move off of that into the rest of the season because this is where the season on the brink for North Carolina gets fired up this week going into Duke. But Buck, 59-7, North Carolina beats Campbell after a sluggish start. Overall thoughts on a game that was always in the win column, but there was a lot more that needed to be accomplished.
Well, number one, my major thought is, so far as I know, nobody got hurt, which that's one of the things you want to come out of a game like this with is not avoiding additional injuries. It was good to see a lot of the younger players get some run, and that's and players that are typically never going to see the field. Except in a game like this. And if this game is much tighter, they don't get as much run as they did. But, a lot of these guys spring and fall, and they're up at 5:30 in the morning and weight room and this and that and the other, and they're cannon fodder for the starters. And, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on Taylor Viplis, but he did more than his share of being a tackling dummy for the North Carolina offense back in the day. So it's great to see those guys get some run. They're high school friends and family and people they go to church with and whatnot. Gives them something to talk about today. So I think that's another big part of what happened yesterday and why that's a good thing.
Indeed, Connor Harrell gets some run. Chris Culliver gets a touchdown pass. A ton of guys. I'd love to see the participation chart. It's got to be everybody. Jason, sort of speak to that and also speak to what you saw against Campbell.
Well, again, I having been a practice dummy myself, I wholeheartedly endorse what Buck said, that this kind of game is important, really important for those who recognize that they're not that they are going to go pro in something other than sports, as it were, and it was good to see a lot of those guys get out there late. I think also this was one of those games where, and the hope was this year that there would be more of this over the course of the season in terms of getting some blowouts against teams that are not quite as good as you, so that you can get more time for some of the guys that are going to be important for you down the line. I think just getting 4 pass attempts for Connor Harrell was something that's, not nothing. They needed to get guys like Culliver and Connor Harrell and some of the backup, your third string type guys on the lines and fourth string type guys on the lines, guys that are going to play next year. Getting them some opportunities to play while the lights are on, I think, is important. And getting a chance, too, for the coaching staff to see, okay, what's this guy really look like once the lights are on is important as well. So, there's only so much you can gain from that, even when the lights are on in this kind of game. You're still not, you still don't know how that person's going to respond against comparable talent in that situation, but it is a step forward. It is an important thing to be able to see. So, if anything, I'd have liked to have seen some of those younger guys or backups a little bit earlier. But I think they all got a fair amount of time, and that was really important.
One thing that had folks a little bit twisted up early, Buck, is that Campbell appeared to have some success running tempo, and I want to talk about this. Is I think the one thing you do carry forward, aside from the younger guys or the guys that don't play a lot getting reps, is Campbell was able to give North Carolina issues with tempo. Buck, did you see that, or is that just my imagination? Muted there too. Gotcha.
Time change got him.
Okay. All right. Let me go this way. There, we've noticed, especially against Virginia and Georgia Tech, that teams like running tempo on North Carolina, and Campbell possibly picked up on some of that. But looking at it on the season, this is not a new thing. I mean, we have just it just kind of stood out in relief in the Georgia Tech and the Virginia games. But North Carolina, their average opponents are snapping the ball 24.1 seconds per play. That's ninth in the nation. So teams have been running tempo on North Carolina all year. Now, part of that seconds per play we have to throw in comes from the fact that teams have been playing behind against North Carolina a lot this year. So they were snapping the ball a little bit quicker in the third and fourth quarters trying to catch up. So that's part of the equation too. But still, in the top 10 nationally of seconds per play for North Carolina, it's a thing. And getting a hold of that ability to play against tempo is something that I'm guessing is going to be a huge offseason focus. I don't know how much you can correct it in the 3 games they have remaining. But, yeah, it's a thing, and it's something that they need to concentrate on going forward.
Ben Sherman just posted the snap counts on InsideCarolina.com. If folks are listening, can check out those as well. Kamen Rucker, 57.
Too many.
Too many. Javari Ritzy next up with 31. Cedric Gray and Power Eccles with 50, 55 apiece. Too many, especially in a game like this. But, Jason, let's talk about this tempo issue just a little bit. I always – this is my uneducated view of it. If you are a defense and a team is running tempo on you, just keep it simple. Run something, and don't try to have a bunch of different variances in it when it's going super fast. So how does a team deal with tempo that struggles with tempo? How does North Carolina get better at dealing with this tempo issue? If Campbell's giving them issues in the first quarter especially, how do you, as Buck said, how do you get better at it in season when you still got a month left to go?
Well, I mean, there's a few things. One is that you're right. I mean, one of the things that tempo forces you to do is to play your base calls more, and that's one of the reasons that teams run tempo. Is they want to keep you out of other types of calls that might cause them trouble. So they're basically, they know if we speed up, they're going to have to be in one of these 2 or 3 calls. So, that's part of it. I mean, the general rule of thumb for me defensively is if you're going to be facing a lot of tempo, you have to have a base call that the rest of your whole defense knows, like, if I don't get the call, we're probably in this call.
That's what I mean.
Right?
So you don't have bust of
right. So it's just operate along these lines. Now the problem is that all those base calls are the kinds of calls that are going to get you some one-on-ones against certain looks. And if you have guys you're trying to protect, if you have guys that maybe can't do certain things as well, then sometimes that exposes those guys. Right? That's one thing. Another thing is that, teams don't just go tempo now. They go tempo specifically to throw little things at you. So I'll give you a good example. Yesterday in the Pitt Florida State game, Pitt gave Florida State a good bit, all they could handle early on. And then that game kind of got broken open on a tempo play. Florida State went tempo, and they lined up a tight end at offensive tackle, and their offensive tackle on the other side at tight end, and quickly threw a seam up to that tight end who released. And Pitt never had time to identify him as an eligible receiver. Right? Teams do this now, where it's not just tempo for the sake of tempo. They go tempo with some weird formation, with formation to the boundary and a nub that they haven't shown for a while, and all of a sudden the problem isn't just the call. The problem is, okay, Okay, they're going fast. They're going fast. He's lined up over here. We got to get our check over. And it's the communication of you can have the call, but you still have to figure out who's got what gap against what front, against what look, who's matching with what receiver, and getting that sort of thing down is sometimes the bigger challenge because you still have to communicate on defense. And part of the thing that makes it trickier is that modern defenses you're matching up as much as anything. And so sometimes if you're going to go against tempo, sometimes you spot drop. Sometimes you do things where, okay, we're not even going to match. We're going to drop to our spot here. You do some of that stuff, but then that's changing a lot of who you are as a defense. And you start spot dropping and teams start having guys open. So there's a give and take here. The thing that really wrecks tempo is if you've got guys that can get penetration and wreck the offensive line. And we've talked about how many times this season have I come back to, well, they really need to get better play from the defensive line, right? The thing that wrecks tempo is that, and then having guys that can handle one-on-ones. Your defenses that do well against that stuff have really good corners, which I think Carolina's got some pretty good corners. They have safeties that are not matchup liabilities, and they're not liabilities against the run, and they have disruptors on the defensive line who get penetration. And Carolina has not wrecked teams with penetration a whole lot this year. And that's going to make it tricky. That's going to make it tough at times because it's a team that depends on being able to do some blitzing and do some other stuff to be able to get more pressure, to be able to get penetration and all of that. And you can't do as much of that against tempo.
Yeah, it's an interesting take, but it all comes back to your point there at the end. It's all about defensive line, defensive tackles. You can do a lot of disrupting, and teams can't do a whole lot when your defensive line wears you out up front. Buck, anything else from the Campbell game? I see some people in the chat wanting us to talk about the end of the first half. Not sure what was happening there. It looked like they tried to sub before they spiked it and then sub in to get a field goal.
Somebody, and I'm telling you, players rarely run out there like that. So somebody probably called for a, what you've got field goal quick. You're getting field goal ready. And somebody, whether it was one of the players who's, a leader or whatever, when they saw them line up, thought, okay, it's turbo, time to get out there and kick our extra point or the field goal quickly. It was either that or one of the assistants or, whoever is in charge of getting that out there called, the code word for get out there quickly. And it was misunderstood. That's basically the way that's going to work. And folks started running out there as they're getting ready to do their spike. And, it's easy to have happen, but you've got to have better stuff, better protections in place to systemically avoid that kind of thing from happening. I mean, that's the sort of thing that'll lose you a game against better competition. And everything else was fine. They were in position to get the spike well done. They executed it well on offense. They had the field goal team ready and in position. I mean, simple, but it's, a stupid mistake where somebody runs out there, or I suspect, if I were going to guess, that one of the assistants hollered the code word for get out there quickly, and all those guys started running out there and, like, no, not now. Oh.
Like, it reminded me, Buck, of the Music City Bowl there at the end where everybody just started running on the field. There were like 20 people on the field trying to figure out what's going on. Buck, last thoughts on Campbell. You mentioned the young guys, and I referenced the snap charts or the snaps, and if folks get on the Inside Carolina Premium board, in addition to getting your Johnny T-shirt discount, you get stuff like this. The snap counts are fascinating. Like we said, Rucker, way too many. Cedric Gray and Power Echols, too many. But so many names that I would wager that 90% of the casual observers hadn't heard, and getting those guys opportunities is certainly a good thing. But Buck, last thoughts on Campbell before we take a short break and look ahead.
Yeah, just following up on something that Jason said, I spoke to the guys that, are not to speak in a derogatory fashion, the tackling dummies, but um, seeing guys that are going to be part of the North Carolina's future. One guy that just has stood out to me since the very first time I laid eyes on him is Tyler Thompson. Um, he looked really good in the spring game, and now at that point he was going against lesser competition, third or fourth string guys maybe. But against Campbell, and also you're stepping down in competition level. But he's going to be a player. I mean, it just looks like he's going to be a player. And some other guys stepped up that caught your eye. And I think the overall impression is that in the first several classes that Mac had, there were a lot of really big name guys that just didn't really pan out on defense. And we're seeing some guys, I think, coming up that may not have been quite as highly ranked that look like they're going to be ball players. So I just toss that in as a final thought on the Campbell game.
27 guys on defense played more than 10 snaps. That's good. That's good. I do see a few names on here that I would have liked to have seen get significantly more snaps. But, I wanted to see Sebastian Cheeks get more than 5. I wanted to see Randy Caldwell get more than 4. A few of those guys, I wanted to see both J. Brown Harvey and Tyler Thompson get more than 11 and 14, respectively. I wanted to see those guys a little earlier, and a couple of these guys up at the top of the list, whether that's Power Eccles, who still had 50, Cedric Gray, who had 55, Kamen Rucker, who had 57. Some of those guys I would have liked to have seen with half that workload and share that down the list a little bit more, but still good to see those guys. And a couple of those guys look good in their small action. Cheeks and Caldwell moved well. Some good indicators there, but those are guys that are going to be needed next year. And, they're going to be playing without a whole lot of experience.
Yep, and given the way bowl seasons go and bowl games go these days, possibly needed in December. Wherever that shakes out, several of these guys. Anyway, I want to take a second to talk about Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com, sponsors of the show, title sponsors of these shows and all of Inside Carolina's podcast content. Also, friends of you, if you're an Inside Carolina premium subscriber. Like I said, you get the snap counts, you get Jason's articles, you get Buck's column. Buck's column's always on point. Not sure how the man does it 4 times a week in football season.
He used to do it 7 days a week. It was incredible.
Yeah, it's just I can't even. My brain does not process. And so not only did we talk about film breakdown and snap counts and all that kind of stuff and recruiting, Buck's column's worth the price of admission as well. Inside Carolina premium subscribers get that 10% off Johnny T-Shirt. You can get all the swag you need. It was a little chilly to start that Bowls Lot tailgate yesterday. Some of those Johnny T-shirt, sweatshirts, and hoodies would have been helpful for me as I froze out there. And if you watched the Inside Carolina Live video, you could see a lot of shivering going on. Anyway, check them out at JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Check them out on East Franklin Street if you're in town. Of course, basketball season's here. They got all you can need. National guys will pay the bills. It's the day after a Campbell game. North Carolina routs the Camels 59-7. All right, guys, I want to get into the second portion of the show, but I'm going to go ahead and do my second ad discussion because that's Congruity. They are sponsors of these podcasts, and they're a new sponsor, but they're not a new company. They're a company that has a national presence and also a local presence, and they're here for you for your HR and payroll outsourcing needs. They'll take care of your people in your small business, mid-sized business, while you have an opportunity to grow that business even bigger than you thought possible. Congruity does that. Top-of-the-line technology, great customer service. They transform your organization into that small business, that medium-sized business, to a huge business. They've done it with themselves. They can do it with your business as well. Go to congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. If you're an Inside Carolina listener or viewer, you get that free assessment to see how they can help you with payroll and HR. Again, it's free. congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. Check them out, Darren and Matt. They're great sponsors and friends here. They can be great helpers to your business world out in the real world. Buck Sanders, looking ahead. Duke on Saturday, 8 o'clock. We go from the extremes of noon to the other end of the spectrum, ACC network at 8 o'clock. Duke has struggled. Clemson looked great. NC State continues to win ugly football games. This next three games, we've said all year, shape the season. How you feeling going into them for North Carolina?
Well, early in the year, when the schedule was announced, Mac Brown had a little fit about it because he didn't want to play those 3 games in a row down the stretch. I think they shape up a little differently than they did at the beginning of the season, and I don't know what the availability is going to be for Duke's quarterbacks. I think Leonard is done for the year.
Yeah.
And the number 2 is done as well, right? So they're on their 3rd quarterback, and although they won yesterday, he had like 126 yards passing or something like that or less. Wasn't great. So they have made themselves into a one-dimensional team offensively. They don't have much choice about that, it appears at this point, although who knows? They might bring in a 4th guy off the bench and he throw for 300 yards on UNC. That would be the Carolina thing to do. But Duke is looking pretty one-dimensional, and North Carolina's had good success against teams that ended up being one-dimensional. The 2 losses that they had, both of those teams were able to run and throw the ball, particularly Georgia Tech. So we'll see how that goes. Clemson, I don't know how Cade Klubnik looked so great in the bowl game last year and has been so mediocre this year.
I didn't think he looked great in the bowl
Carolina
game
made him
last
look
year.
great.
Not the bowl game, the ACC championship game.
ACC championship game.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't think he looked great there. He just didn't have to do anything. He just tossed the ball out, and they just kept getting yardage. I think his average depth of target was like 3 or 4 yards last year.
Well, he hadn't even been able to do that this year, though.
Yeah.
I guess that's Buck's point.
Yeah, he's took a step down from what I thought from the ACC championship game. And Clemson just doesn't have the skilled athletes that they typically normally have, although they made Notre Dame look pretty bad. So my expectations for that game are not great for UNC. I think they have a chance to win that. And, here's one thing to keep in mind that, and this is down to Drake May, North Carolina is 8th in the nation in passing offense. And think about what Drake has had to deal with this year. Tez was has only been able to be in 5 games this year out of 9. Kobe Pasor was lost after 5 games. Nate McCullum has only played in 7 games this year. North Carolina only has 1 receiver in the top 10 in the ACC nationally, and they have no receiver in the top 100 nationally. But they have the 8th best passing offense in the nation. That's all down to Drake May. And a lot of it is down to the tight end position, which is something that we have never seen before at UNC, and it might be a while before we see it again. Combined, they have 50 catches, nearly 800 yards, and 7 touchdowns out of the tight end position. That's pretty amazing stuff. The final game against NC State, it's going to be a rock fight. NC State is going to be off the chain hype for that game. those games, can go either way. And I want to say the home records for the teams are like reversed. I mean, you almost have a better chance of winning on the road in this game than you do at home. So we'll just see how that works out. But all three of the games, I think, are winnable. And Duke is not going to tempo North Carolina, I do not believe.
They run it some.
I don't think we'll see a lot of that. And the other thing is when North Carolina gives up a first down, they give it up against the pass. Of the first downs they've given up, 105 of them came when teams threw the ball on North Carolina. And I think that has to do, especially in tempo, when people run tempo, the default position for Gene Chizik is to kind of play off the line of scrimmage, and the next thing you know, opposing offenses can throw it 10 yards and get the first down without breaking too much of a sweat because there's just not – they're not playing tight on the wide receivers. Duke's not going to be able to do that. So we'll see. Clemson, they could go tempo. NC State, not so much, I don't think. We'll see. So we'll have to see how each individual game shakes out. But these last three games, all of them are winnable. Now, they're also all losable. So we'll see how that the final story gets written in each of those games.
All right, Jason, give us common themes that you, at this moment in time, expect to see in the next 3 weeks for North Carolina.
3 teams that are going to run the football.
I figure Wildcat 75% run the football, however they do it, for all 3 teams.
Yeah, they are going to run the football. I mean, the interesting thing is I've thought for a while that Phil Maffa was actually the better back for Clemson this season, and felt like he actually was getting fewer carries than he should. And yesterday he was the feature because the starter, whose name is
Shipley,
escaping me, Shipley, because Shipley was out, and Maffa went for 180 against Notre Dame, and that's a good Notre Dame defense.
Just mashed them.
Yeah, so Clemson is going to try to do that the remainder of the season, and they're going to definitely try to do that against the North Carolina defensive front that has shown itself vulnerable to getting run against, the last couple weeks. So they're going to do it. Duke, as Buck mentioned, is, they're not exactly a passing juggernaut. Thing is, even with Leonard, they weren't throwing it for 300 a game. Leonard's a really good quarterback, but a big part of what Riley Leonard brought to the table was that he's that basketball athlete. He's like 6'4". He's one of those guys that, he's a lot bigger than you think. When you see him on screen and you see him throwing, and then you see him and you go, oh, he's big. He's 6'4" and change kind of guy, and will run through tackles and then is, legit 4'5" athlete. So the thing that Leonard would do is that he would be a tiebreaker for them in the running game over and over again, and add an extra dimension. And Duke has another Grayson. Grayson Loftus is going to be the starter at quarterback for them. He's their third guy. I would expect him to be the starter. And thing is, Loftus has actually thrown it well the last couple games for them. He's thrown it pretty well. The reason that they beat Wake Forest down the stretch is he made throws. So they are two-dimensional, I think, at the quarterback position, the quarterback being able to make decisions and put the ball on target. Reason they've not thrown the football super well this year is that they just don't have a bunch of playmakers outside. They've got Calhoun really as a sort of speed guy, and that's kind of it. But they're gonna run the football, and they're gonna run it all sorts of different ways. Kevin Johns is he's a Malzahn tree coach. He was Mike Norvell's offensive coordinator at Memphis, and that's the offense that he runs. And that offense is going to have 8 different ways to line up and block, counter or some single wing stuff, outside zone G, different things that they're going to do, and they're going to find ways to make it difficult on Carolina's front. That's great, right? And then NC State. We all know what we're going to see with NC State. I don't need to tell anybody. That's going to be a team that's going to try to ugly that game up as much as possible, and try to keep it from being a track meet, and just try to win with physicality and just winning at the point of attack. Carolina's going to have to try to make that a track meet game by beating one of the best secondaries in the country. So these are 3 games that are not the most favorable matchups in Carolina's favor that we've seen this year. And we'll see how Carolina plays. They're going to have to play well to win each of these 3 games. And starts with Duke this week.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. We'll talk about it all week, but I want to see if there's some flexibility in schemes, both offensively and especially defensively going into these games, because I think if you're going to be married to a certain style where you play one of those little round coins all the time against these 3 teams, Jason, I think we'll talk about this on the game plan. They're going to get whipped if they're not careful up front by Duke, NC State, and Clemson. And I think at this point, you got to figure out a way to beat Duke and State. And if Clemson, if you can get to Clemson, somebody in the chat asked about NC State and Miami. State dominated Miami, and Tyler Van Dyke kept throwing it to the other team. And so there you go. Buck, last thoughts. I'm going to let you get us out of here. I told everybody we were going early, and we're getting out early. I got things to do. Might be the last things to do, but I got things to do, Buck. Close this show. Tell us what to expect with your column dropping here in a minute. Tell us what folks should be thinking about from the elder statesman of the North Carolina football program at Inside Carolina.
I don't know if I got the chops to
you
do
got
all
the
of that, but one thing I will leave you with, and this is something that we haven't seen in an extremely long time, if ever, that I can remember. But North Carolina is 3rd in the nation in turnover margin. That random thing you can never predict, you don't know when it's going to raise its head, and you can't really count on it happening. But they're plus 12 on the year in turnover margin, which is unbelievable. That's something we have hardly ever seen from a North Carolina team, especially under Mac Brown. He's usually in the 1 to 2 turnover margin total for the year. So to be plus 12 is an unusual year for North Carolina, and it's obviously something you can't predict. But we can at least hope for it, right? Maybe we can convince Duke to put the ball on the ground a few times. Did they do that last year, Tommy? I think I remember them putting the ball on the ground a little bit last year.
They had a missed field goal, a couple bad penalties. Maybe I can't remember, but yeah, they gave that game away in Wallace Wade last year, and to Carolina's credit, they took it.
North Carolina is ready to accept all gifts that other teams maybe want to bestow them on the year.
Tis the season of giving. One thing I will say that it needs to be a focus is the penalties, and whether or not
let's hope we don't get that crew again.
Yeah,
it's the same crew that gets North Carolina for that holding every time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like whether or not it's a penalty, and that was an interesting question I asked Chip Lindsey last week, probably ask again, is how do you deal with guys, or what do you say to a player who gets called for a penalty that probably wasn't a penalty, but it cost you a touchdown?
That one against 53 was brutal, man.
I mean, it's happened multiple times for North Carolina, and continues to happen, that'll get you beat in games like this coming up. So how do you clean up when you didn't make a mistake? I don't know. I guess it's tough. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch leading up. Duke, North Carolina, 8 o'clock next Saturday night. Inside Carolina Live will be in the Bowls lot one final time for the season from 5 to 7. Join Joey Powell and myself. A lot of content.
Congrats to Carolina's field hockey team.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, everybody says, why is field hockey not as good as they have been? And I'm like, because the best player in the world is actually not able to play anymore. She's the coach, and yet they still manage to be number one and win an ACC championship. Just impressive what's going on with that program. Tons of content. VIP shot. Justin Jackson new podcast with John Bowman. We'll be back with On the Beat. We'll be back with the day after. We'll be back with the game plan. Stick with Inside Carolina. Thanks, everybody, for joining us early. Thanks, Buck and Jason. And thanks, Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity.
Good luck,
This
Tommy.
is the last.
It shall
this
be
is the
fun.
last time I talk to you, Tommy. It's been fun.
I'm
Yep.
leaving. I'm cut.